Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. This is a late opinion piece on the December 14th, 2020 Board of Supervisors meeting. And I'll just dig right in. Started out with public comment. I was the only public comment for the entire meeting. And I asked a couple questions and discussions, and these are the replies. I asked about some of the spending for the month, $17,000 that we paid to Total Recycle. And according to Jennifer Savage, that $17,000, two $8,000 plus checks for Total Recycling was to pay Total Recycling for recycled material that we delivered to them that they processed but could no longer make any money off of it, selling it to China. Problem with Total Recycle is that it's a Mascaro company. He built the business, the recycle plant, and it's his operation. And I'm just have a problem with understanding why we're paying $17,000 to him because he can't make any money off the recycled material that we paid Blazinski to deliver to him. So I have to read the contract. I don't understand why we have to subsidize his recycle business. It shouldn't be our problem that he can no longer make any money off of it. So the other issue is I brought up about the Treasury report, and I talked about the fact that it currently shows a over $500,000 deficit. So we spent more money than we brought in on revenue. And the fact is that not only did we spend more, but we subsidized the revenue by moving $1,286,000 into the general fund from our reserves. And our reserves are the proceeds from the sewer fund. So we're subsidizing our taxes, our tax base, using reserve funds. I'm going to have a whole big video talking about this at some point in time. I also brought up about the alleged $3.8 million surplus, and Jennifer Savage once again indicated that this was her number because she added up all the funds, and that meant that we had a $3.8 million surplus. Well, it's really bogus. It doesn't make any sense. You have to realize that the general fund is basically our budget fund. That's where the whole budget is focused on. There's a few other little funds that contribute to the total budget, but they're minimal, maybe $800,000 out of a $12.8 million budget. So $12 million of it is the general fund issues. But she said there was a $3.8 million surplus for 2020. And I've been poking her about this all year long. And she said once again that she added up all the funds. And that's why we have a $3.8 million surplus. But that's ridiculous. It doesn't make sense. It's not logical. Because what they did was they created another fund, a capital equipment fund, and they took $5 million from the proceeds of the wastewater treatment plant and put it in that fund and added that up and claimed we had a $3.8 million surplus. So if you follow that logic, then throwing that $5 million in there, if you take it out, instead of having a $3.8 million surplus, it almost exactly matches the deficit of $1.2 million, and they moved that $1.2 million from the reserve fund into the general fund, if you follow what I'm saying. So we didn't have a $3.8 million surplus. They moved $5 million in to cover the deficit, which was $1.2 million. So $5 million minus $1.2 million shows a $3.8 million surplus. It's all smoke and mirrors. There's no doubt about it. The facts support it. The next item on the agenda for this meeting on December 14th was a presentation by KCBA. And I want to make a little bit of a few comments. And then all of this is simply my opinion, much of it based on fact. Well, KCBA, we wasted, I don't know, $14,000, $15,000 to have them evaluate our current site. And I don't know why we did this. We know that their plan is not to do anything there, but to move up to the promenade. So it boggles my mind why we would spend $15,000 to look at the current site, but that's what they did. But there are a few things that come out that are clear and obvious, to me anyway. This report is 100 pages long, and what it does is it confirms to me that the supervisors currently, and maybe for the last 7 years in the township, did absolutely nothing to maintain the township assets. We see it at the Reading Country Club, but in this report by KCBA, we definitely see it at our current site where the police and administration is. They refuse to do upgrades over all these last 10 years at least. So what KCBA did was basically tell the board what they wanted to hear. And it's not good. They estimated that we need about 144,000 square feet for all the activities that we have to carry on. One interesting thing that came out of this, though, was that they made a comment that if we didn't own the promenade, if this was the only property that we owned, they could develop an architectural plan that would handle everything for us. We wouldn't need to buy another piece of property. They could actually design something that would fill all of our needs right on this property. So why didn't we do that, right? Certainly would have been less expensive. So back to this estimate of 144,000 square feet. Now we don't know what that encompasses. I think they eliminated the fire station. I don't know if it involves the community center. I think what they said was, and I'm not sure because they're never really clear, that this 144,000 square feet are the square feet we need for the services that we currently have at our current site. So probably doesn't include the community center. But I figure about $200 a square foot new construction, that would cost us almost $29 million. If you add in the $2.3 million we paid to buy the promenade, we're already at $32 million. And I think we're going to exceed that. We're going to have changes, work order changes. The contractors we're going to hire, which will probably be out of Conshohocken or somewhere around there, they're really going to, get the most money for their services. And we are restricted. We have to pay prevailing wages. So I'm not sure exactly if that will bump up to $200 per square foot. It could. But my conclusions from this KCBA presentation is that, they're trying to get everything at one site like the promenade. And, this is 1960s mentality. We don't need administration right next to the police. We don't need engineering right next to administration necessary. So there's a lot of things that we could do. And they're talking about that they want to spread it out. They don't want to build up, they just want to spread it out. And that's costly as well. So my take on this and my plan is basically that KCBA is doing everything they can to support this false narrative that we need to build brand new administration buildings, spend our reserve funds. I don't think that's the right way to go. I think that my plan is a smart plan for the taxpayers all the way around, and that is to simply upgrade the current site for the police and the highway department. The highway department doesn't take up a lot of space. And if we turn the rest of the facilities over to the police department, I think they'll be very adequate. We spend some money to upgrade everything, and it'll be fine for them. It's a nice actually location. And then administration and engineering, we can lease space somewhere else in the township. Lease space is very cheap these days, and we can put them in another area. We don't have to own the property. We can lease it. And I think if we do that, we could save $25 to $30 million of taxpayer money. And then we can have that reserve fund sitting in there for when we have emergency needs instead of spend. So that's my plan. I don't know if you'll agree with that, but I'd love to hear your opinions on it. So the next thing that we did, we went to regular approvals. And I talked about a couple things. I wanted to talk about the treasurer's report. And so they made some comments about that after I brought up the treasurer's report. And primarily, I pointed out that we have over a $500,000 deficit already as of 11/30/2020. More than $500,000. And they kind of questioned my numbers, but then later on, Mr. Staub asked Mrs. Savage, where does she think we're going to end up in 2020 budget and spending? And she indicated that she expected revenue to be $12 million and expenses to be $12.6 million. So that looks like it falls within my number, $600,000 deficit. And they'll have to make that up, of course. Now, mind you, it includes the almost $1.3 million of reserve funds that we've already put in there. So it looks like to make up the $600,000 deficit, unless they have some late year-end revenue coming in, we're going to have to put some more reserve funds in there to pay the bills. Then they started discussing about the financial advisor during this treasurer's report conversation, and I just don't understand it. Why would we hire financial advisors? For what? To manage our money, our reserve funds? Because here's the thing, by law, the state requires that we be very conservative. There are very few investment choices that we can make. Mostly U.S. Treasuries, short-term obligations of the federal government, savings accounts at banks and CDs, things of that nature, and they all have to be insured. This is smart for our government to require this because supervisors, of course, aren't expected to be very good money managers, but these things are very simple. They don't take a lot of intellectual power to determine how to invest these things in them. So I don't understand why we would need financial advisors, but that's what they were talking about. Also, Mr. Speece made a comment about how much money would we get down from trickle-down money from the state, and related to COVID. And someone mentioned that $26K we might get back from them, and this is just a small pittance of what our expenses are. So that's pretty much about the treasurer's report. And then we're going to talk about now is some unfinished business. Item number 1, which was to approve the resolution and adopt the 2021 budget. Now, they approved it on December 14th. They claim there's no tax increase, but they expect the revenues to come in at $12.9 million. Now, this is the general fund. 12 million of it is from the general fund, so you got $900,000 from other smaller revenue sources like the police department and engineering. They make up the bulk of that $900,000. But 12 million of it is from the general fund. This is our budget fund. It's subsidized in 2021 with $1.7 million from reserve funds. another $1.7 million. And they expect the expenditures to be $12.8 million. So $12.9 million revenue in total, $12.8 million in expenses, and their numbers figure out to having a $65,000 surplus at the end of the year. I don't believe it. The last 5 or 7 years, every single year we've had a deficit. I think we will continue to be spending in the deficit. Some of these revenue projections are based on certain things happening, like having a better 2021 than a 2020, and it doesn't look like it's going to fall out that way. So earned income taxes play a key role in this, as do real estate taxes. So it can very easily go south, and there's no spending suggestions that they've ever turned away. They'll continue to spend. So my prediction is that 2020 is going to end up with about $700,000 deficit, and we're going to see 2021 also in hundreds of thousands of dollars in deficits, not a surplus. So if you look at the budget, it's available on Exeter Township's website, and you'll be able to see that she has the first slide in there where she adds up all of the funds. And as you know, in 2020, she said, I added up all the funds and I had a $3.8 million surplus. Well, you'll look at this same worksheet, add up all the funds, and she has it down there in the right-hand corner, a deficit of over $14 million. So so it conflicts with her assumption that we're going to have a $65,000 surplus, right? $14 million deficit, and a little asterisk down there that it's all going to be covered by reserve funds. So the truth about this is the presentations from Mrs. Savage are not accurate. They're misleading. They don't really show the true situation because they're keep adding apples and oranges together. She finally learned that term recently, but that's an accounting term to indicate that, these two things don't work together. They're opposites. And that's the case here. So it confuses a lot of people. I might have a slide showing you later on in my opinion piece what's going on with this budget, where those reserves come into the budget. Also, the $50,000 Homestead Act, they say it's still in place. I read the ordinance. They don't have to renew it, but they can suspend it anytime they want, or they could change the number. So until those tax bills go to the office to be printed, we can't be assured that we will have the Homestead Act next year. So we'll see what happens. And so that's the budget. Also, going back to the regular approvals, I got a couple notes here on the right to know request and the golf report. These two reports are really quite meaningless. They're not presenting the information that we would like to see or what we should see to give us some informed information. It's all basically smoke and mirrors, useless manipulated data. The golf report, for example, they just tell us what the gross margin is, revenue minus operating expenses. But there are other expenses involved in this as well that aren't reflected in his numbers. The fact of the matter is the golf course loses money. It doesn't make money. On the right to know request, we have 3 new requests, and I can tell you who they're from. I think they're from Vinny Bianconi. You'll see my name mentioned in there. He wants to know how many right to know requests I submitted. He wants to know how much it cost for 2019, and how much it cost for 2020. And when he asks about the cost, he's talking about how much money did the township spend on my requests. And I want to make it very clear. If they just gave me the information that I requested, the cost would be extremely minimal, almost nothing. But what they've done is they've challenged my right to this information. And subsequently, they had the lawyer involved, and they spent thousands of dollars on my requests. I wouldn't be surprised if it's around $100,000 for the 2 years. I mean, and Mr. Bianconi is going to try to make me look like the bad guy, but I can tell you, I didn't make them spend that money. I requested documents. They said I couldn't have them. I knew that I had the right to have them, and I appealed the cases. In fact, we have a recent win. I appealed some requests, and the Office of Open Records, OOR, ruled in my favor again that I should have the documents that I requested. In fact, the OOR wrote me this letter indicating that I won the appeal, and along with that, they provided a legal analysis, which I'd like to read to you. They say, the Office of Open Records says that the objective of the right to know law is to empower citizens by affording them access to information concerning the activities of the government. Further, this important open government law is designed to promote access to official government information in order to prohibit secrets, scrutinize the action of public officials, and make officials accountable for their actions. So that's what this law is all about. I exercise my right as a taxpayer of Exeter Township to request this information. And I think what Mr. Bianconi is trying to suggest is that I exceeded my rights, or I maliciously caused the township to incur expenses because of my request for information. But I have the right to do that. I think Mr. Bianconi plans on running for supervisor next year. And this is the kind of guy that you do not want to elect in office. He will suppress all of you if you are seeking information. He wants to eliminate the public's ability to obtain this information and keep an eye on what our elected officials are doing. A vote for him would be a vote for the Gestapo, I guess, you know. So that's that, you know. I have every right to request information, and if they want to spend thousands of dollars trying to prohibit my obtaining that, that's their decision, not mine. So as we move on here, I want to talk about the items, unfinished business number 4, okay? And this is related to authorization for Reading Country Club Golf Course Master Plan. And I have a note here with a question mark. Really? We need a master plan for our golf course? I disagree with that. We've made tremendous investment for 2020 into the golf course. It looks fine, but it's not going to make much more money. The Pell report, which is a report in about 2014 that was done by an independent government agency, basically told us the golf course alone will, if we're lucky, break even or maybe make 20 grand a year. Well, they didn't factor in all these other expenses like administrative costs, depreciation, and interest on the bonds financing. So they didn't include that. But I think continued investment is unwise, and to a great degree, you know, we have golfers are the only ones that can use it, and there's a lot of people in the township that are not golfers. So we should be lucky that we have this. And think of this, this isn't a private club golf course anymore. This is a municipal golf course. And I played on a lot of municipal golf courses in California. And there is some neglect because local governments owning golf courses can only expend so many funds. And we're going to pay $12,800 for this master plan. And I'm going to tell you, I don't think, whatever that plan tells us to do, I don't think a lot of the things are going to happen. It's a waste of money. It's a payout to some friends of theirs. And because it's a professional service, they don't even need to get 3 bids. So this is someone that they're familiar with, and they want to give them a handout. Brian Aarons makes a comment which I don't really, and I'm a golfer, or I was a golfer, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but he wants to restore this report, or this plan will restore the integrity and move us into the regime of golf. Again, not anymore. We're not an up and coming golf venue. This is a municipal golf course. We need to work, if we're going to keep the golf course, we need to work on getting the costs down so that they're manageable and they get close to meeting the expenses that we incur. And they're not close to that now. Break even is acceptable, but I don't think we should ask the taxpayers of this township to subsidize golfing for a small group of people. So I want to keep it, if we could keep it, but we have to be smart about it. And right now, Mr. Speece, Mr. Staub, and Mr. Galtier, who are members of the ERCCP, that really now controls our golf course, they want to spend, unlimited spending. And they're in their glory right now. But trust me, that could change on a dime. So the problem, what is the problem? Well, we have used to have a synergy here with the food and beverage and banquet business and the golf course. And we need to concentrate on that other part of this asset. We need to get that building back in shape. We need to open it up to serve food and beverages and banquets. That's where we made the money. We made about $250,000 or more in annual cash flow from operating that. People came to the golf course. After their golf outing, they came in and had a couple drinks and ate dinner, and that's where we really made it out on this. So, and since Cusatus and Speece ruined that whole deal with having someone manage that facility, it hasn't earned a dime for us. And it's terrible because it should be making $250,000 a year minimal. And it cost us $4 million, that fiasco with that Mr. Cusatus seconded the motion to kick Viva out because simply over a liquor license dispute, which is, if you look at my videos at exeterunited.com, I have a video that shows Mr. Granger explaining what the problem was, and it was a simple one. All we needed to do was hire the bar staff under our liquor license, send Viva invoice, and everything would have been fine. No lawsuit. So, one last item on this master plan, which again I think is foolish. Mr. Cusatus made a comment that, I must have been chuckling about this for about 2 minutes because it was so outrageous. And he makes a comment, and you can hear it. It's unfinished business number 4. He claims that the public should be included in every step of the way on this master plan. And he says we have to make sure we do it right and that we're honest with the public, as we have been for the last few years. So those of you who know me, those of you who know Mr. Cusatus, know why this is one of the funniest comments he's ever made. Because Mr. Cusatus happens to be a chronic liar. There's probably not a lie he didn't enjoy. And you can tell when he's lying, he's got a little smirk on his face. You can see he's laughing at you while he's lying to you. So I doubt that the public's going to be involved every step of the way. I don't see how they could change their behavior towards the public. And I don't think that I don't think there's one man on that board who's honest. And as you'll see later, I'll talk about some more dishonesty. So it doesn't bode well for us, let's put it that way. And the last item under old business that I want to talk about briefly is the electronic sign, okay? They talk about this electronic sign, it's item number 6, and they still haven't figured out what they want to do. They do not know what to do with this electronic sign. No plans are finalized. I think it's a bad idea for now, because are they moving up to the promenade or staying where they're at? Where should we put this sign, right? They haven't even made that clear. I think they should delegate this to a committee of citizens. Get it out of the Board of Supervisors' hands, because they're not capable of doing this, really. I mean, and it makes sense to have the committee of citizens make suggestions to them, and then they can decide. But most of the conversation, led by Mr. Joe Staub, was concerning advertising revenue. And as a corporate executive in management and coming up through the ranks in accounting, I found this to be very funny, because they talked as if this electronic sign was going to generate incredible amounts of revenue. And I don't know about you, but I'm sick and tired of advertising, seeing it everywhere. If this sign is meant to communicate information regarding our township to the public, I think we should keep it that way, keep it pristine. We do not need advertising on this thing, all right? That's my point. So this whole thing on the electronic signs, I would categorize it as silly talk, baby talk, but you listen to it. It's old business, number 6. Then we move on to new business. And the first new business I'd like to talk about is number 2. Number 2 on new business is the fee schedule. And there's more confusion talking about this. They don't elaborate on all the different fees that have changed. They only talk about a few. The primary discussion was on the fees they want to charge for the sports fields. And it came up that they're considering eliminating the fees for the sports fields. And during this conversation, it was clear that no one else around us eliminates the fees. They all charge fees for the use of their sports fields. And anyone from anywhere in Berks County or outside of Berks County, if they want to, could come in and pay the fee to use our sports fields. And so they want to eliminate it. And in other words, have us, the taxpayers, subsidize the fields for anyone. Now, it's a problem because we have to spend money to maintain the fields, repair them if they're damaged, and pick up the trash and so forth. So there are expenses involved in this, and actually the one lady who oversees the sports fields, she brought that up. She said she didn't think her budget might not be able to handle it if we don't charge some kind of fees. So, and then you have the COVID effect. You know, we don't know if people are going to be using the fields next year or what's going to happen. And then Mr. Casadas came up with an idea that we don't charge fees, we ask for donations or insist on donations. And later on in his conversation, he kind of contradicts himself because he made a statement that we must earn revenues from these fields. Well, donations normally are a voluntary thing unless he's going to insist, with the wink of an eye, insist on donations. And they could be anything from, well, I'll give you $1, or $100. We don't know if the field is going to be used by 10 people or 50 people during the sporting event. And those things reflect on the condition of the field. So I really think, and donations also, they can fly under the table. And it's our responsibility, or it's the supervisor's responsibility, to make sure all revenue is recorded. So who do I make a donation to, right? Oh, I just give this to Mr. Casadas maybe? It's better to have a structured fee system. And if there's a need to, we can waive the fee for an organization. But that should be far and few in between, because we do need the revenue, at least to the extent that it supports the cost. That's fair. It's fair to everyone. It's fair to the taxpayer. So this nonsense about donations is something that I would expect someone with very little experience in business, certainly, and probably raised by someone who only knows the government, because the government wants to give everything for free to people. So donations, I don't think, are the ticket. They're not the way to go on the fee schedule. There was also a discussion about the recycling increase. And I'll have a slide that you'll be able to see later on that talks about this increase. But real quick, Mr. Speece discusses it. He claims that the frequency of picking up the recyclable material is not the cause of the increase in the cost. Okay? Now look at me. I have a big smile on my face because I know this is nonsense. But this is the false narrative that Mr. Speece is trying to sell us. And he asked Jen Savage, he goes, "Is that right, Jen?" She says, "Yes, it is, Dave. You'll hear it on the video in the meeting under new business fee schedule number 2. And it's just nonsense. It's really nonsense. And it's an obvious attempt to lie to us, to mislead us. And I've been checking around in other communities. Their recycling fees have not escalated like our recycling fees have done. So basically, if you look at this, we increased our fees year over year by $322,000, right? And that's like 100, 322 divided by 221. That's 146% increase. 146%. And I've been checking around to other communities. It's like there's no increase in their recyclable fees. And you have to understand, he's trying to include everything in this thing. It's only related to Blazinski picking up your recyclables at your yard and then taking them to Mr. Mascaro to make money off of those recyclable items. So let me give you some numbers that kind of show you what I'm talking about. In December 2019, I have a little chart you'll see later on. The monthly fee is the last one for that year, $18,450. So that meant that for the year we paid Blazinski $221,400 to pick up our recyclables twice a month, every 2 weeks. Well, Mr. Granger, in his infinite wisdom, decided that it would be a good idea to do it every week, so 4 times a month. And this started in January of 2020. And the new monthly fee went from $18,000 a month to $45,364 a month, for a total of $544,000 a year. So it was a year-over-year increase of $323,000. I'm rounding these numbers up, but $323,000 increase. And Mr. Speece and Mrs. Savage will have you believe that this is caused by the overall costs in the recycling industry. But I encourage you to check with other municipalities, townships, boroughs, as I have, and you'll find out that they haven't had any significant increases in recycling fees. Definitely not 145%. So I'm not afraid to say this. I think Mr. Speece and Mrs. Savage are simply lying to us. And you'll hear him say it has nothing to do with the frequency of pickup. And I'm here to tell you that it has everything to do with the frequency of pickup. So Mr. Speece is completely clueless, and Mrs. Savage is right along with him. Either they're really, really uninformed about this, they're really, really ignorant of it, but more likely they're lying to us. They're trying to justify this increase, and there's no justification of it. Mr. Bartlett talks about it too, supporting their same contention. He says, but he has no conceptual idea of the cost for the township, the situation. He's completely clueless, and they just perpetuate this very false narrative. Now, let's move on to new business item number 3. And under this item, I have a couple opinions. They're telling us that there's no tax increase and rates are going to stay the same, right? Well, I don't know. We'll see what happens. But again, as I mentioned earlier, the general fund, which is the bulk of our budget, $12 million out of $12.9 million total, is subsidized by $1.7 million from the reserves. And this is a big no-no. They shouldn't be doing this, okay? And we're going to have a lot of discussion about that later in the year. They claim the Homestead Act is still in effect. Well, yes, it's still in effect for 2020, but we haven't sent out the new bills for 2021. That won't happen for quite a few months, and they could change that at any time. Any time. So I'm not holding my breath that we're going to get another $50,000 exemption. We could. Not sure yet. But that's going to happen if they let it go. The recycle fees, they're raising from $20 to $35. And this is totally inadequate. We're still subsidizing this with the reserve funds, because what the number should be is more around $52 to $55. So I think we need to revert back to picking up every 2 weeks. I think we have the data to show that Mr. Speece and Mrs. Savage are lying about the fact that the number of pickups are not involved in the significant increase in our recycle costs. You'll see that other communities who haven't made any changes, there's been no change in their recycle fees. And I'm talking about the transportation costs, the pickup by the garbage companies, and then the delivery of it to the recycle plant. And that's what we're really talking about. You'll find that interesting. That's under new business number 3. And then new business number 6, which will be the last new business item I'll discuss. The other ones are just authorizing future activities at the reorganization meeting. But new business item number 6, the Board of Supervisors have authorized that all meetings in 2021 will be virtual. So they're going to keep that invisible wall between us. We're not going to be able to have discussions with them. I've sent them emails and I've asked them questions, and they refuse to communicate with me. Not just the supervisors, but the office staff as well. So if you're someone that questions them or disagrees with their position, you are frozen out. That's the way it is. And we're not going to be able to get to these meetings in person to be able to respond to comments after we make a public comment on the website because we can't respond. So the next one is department reports. Most of the time these reports are pretty mundane, but I want to talk about an issue that's been disturbing to me for the whole year of 2020. And this is when they have a department report and then they do transact business. Department reports are what they say they're supposed to be. It's supposed to be a report from the department head. But often what happens is they end up conducting business that's not listed on the agenda. And therefore they kind of slip it in from the taxpayer who's watching these meetings and would have liked to have been able to have a chance to perhaps comment on it, or at least know about it. So, for example, when the department head of the highway, Clarence Ham, he started talking about his business and snow and everything, but then he talked about community park. And all of a sudden, there was a discussion with other supervisors, with other support people. So there were deliberations that were going on during this department report. And a department report pretty much should be the department head just giving a report, that's it. And maybe someone will have some questions based on what he talked about. But in this case, he brought up the community park and he started asking what they plan on doing about it. This should be listed under agenda items, old business. Fortunately, in this particular case, they're still confused. They're not sure what they're going to do, and this was going on for 5 or 6 months. But there was deliberation, and it wasn't resolved, and no action was taken. But the solicitor, who's the department head for the legal team, Liz McGovern, she had a problem with the sewer enforcement officer. He no longer works for Exeter Township, but they're holding information and reports that she believes belongs to Exeter Township. And they deliberated on it, they discussed it, and then a motion was made and passed. So they did business under the guise of department reports. And it absolutely surprised me that Liz McGovern would do this. She's from the Excellence in Government team from Albright College. I can't believe that she would condone doing business during a departmental head report without it being listed on the agenda. Oh, they're going to give us all kinds of excuses. It came in late, it did that. Well, if it came in late at the beginning of the meeting, you asked the chairman of the board to place it on the agenda so it can be discussed. But even that's really too late, because we put people in the public, we have to have our comments in before noon of the day of that meeting. So if it went on during the meeting, we would never have a chance to provide any public comment on that item, since it was snuck in there under department reports. What should have been done, it should have been tabled, and it should have been put on the next meeting's agenda. Or if it was super important, they should have advertised another meeting before the end of the year. So I have a real problem with them conducting business under the guise of department reports. I'm still looking into if that's legal or not. Problem with the state government and their laws is that they allow anything to happen, and it's very hard to hold them responsible. Also, under Clarence Ham's department, he talks about the fact that he made a decision not to plow or salt the roads until there was a significant amount of snow on the road. To me, this is insane. And I have video I'll show you. I live on a road that is designated as an emergency route, and you'll see where cars are stuck in the snow. And minimally, they should have been keeping the emergency routes open. As soon as snow started laying, they should have been salting it. So they're really negligent in this. I understand Ham is retiring at the end of this year, which is probably a good thing. Hopefully he'll stay home and pursue his hobbies, but he's lost it somewhere. There's no way that this should have happened. And this all was decided before the snowstorm came here. So, but he admits that, we're gonna wait till the snow accumulates. And maybe in some areas you could do that, but certainly not on emergency routes. And this was an emergency road. It comes over Gibraltar Road, turns into 47th Street, and they completely, really messed up their responsibilities. I think it's negligent, and I think not very smart decision, but that's what we have. That's what we seem to have going on quite a bit. For non-agenda items, there were no public comments. And then we got to the supervisor reports. And generally speaking, it was a love fest. They were slapping each other on the back, the great job they did. And if you read my opinion pieces through the year, you know it's far from the truth. And Mr. Speece, when we came to his supervisor report, he didn't say much except, congratulating everyone. But then he turned it over to Jennifer Savage, under his supervisor's report. Now, Jennifer Savage isn't a supervisor, but she made up the bulk of his time. And she wanted to discuss, like apparently she contacted the auditors, Maley, and she wanted to discuss page 10 of the audit report. Now, page 10 is a part of the audit report that I did a opinion piece on the prior meeting. It talks about how much money we lost, over $20 million deficit spending over revenue. And so I guess Jennifer didn't understand what was going on because she had to go back to the auditors and talk to them, and she said she was reading from their report. And I just want you to know that, you know, what she's talking about doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The fact is that that $20 million deficit left the hands of the township. The taxpayers no longer have that money. It's gone. The bulk of it, $10 million, half of the money they put into the pension fund. And they've overfunded the pension. Okay. Now, who in the world would do that? You know, why would we give our $10 million to a third party when we didn't have to? The calculations for the pension fund doesn't require it. It was fully, if you look at the 2019 audit at the end of the year, those funds were fully funded and they had an excess of $10 million in them. They were funded 145%. Now, the only reason you would have a excess in your pension fund is because the funds that you were investing for the pension fund had outperformed their return expectations. Maybe they were invested in stocks and they did a really good job, so they exceeded their expectations. But that's not the case here. They purposely put in extra money that was not necessary. And I believe that, it's my view anyway, that Mr. Speece and Jennifer Savage, who are primarily responsible for this, circumvented state law. You know, I talked earlier about how funds in our possession must be very conservatively invested in CDs and government securities that are guaranteed. But Mr. Speece, I think, thought that he could get around this requirement by giving the pension funds $10 million of our money so that they can invest it without any restrictions. And we could lose this money. And if we do, according to the law, we may be able to claw some of that money back out of Mr. Speece's pocket. There are some laws that would maybe allow us to do that. But the point is, $10 million of that $20 million left our control and are now in the control of a third party. And that third party has some relationship to John Granger. In fact, one of those companies, he admits in a video that he was on the board of directors. So we know that Mr. Speece and Mr. Casadas are still working with John Granger, in my opinion, and probably along with Lisa Vanderlane. So it doesn't bode well for us. Another part of that 20 million, we know the 10 million, well, also 2 million of that was spent in resolving the Viva lawsuit. We settled that for over $1.8 million. Then there were a couple $100,000 in that year that went to Fox and Rothschild related to that lawsuit. And then there were other expenditures, some capital expenditures, as she mentioned, that will be capitalized, okay, and then depreciated over a certain lifetime. But the bulk of it, we gave it away. It's now with a third party. So you can't believe everything they tell you. They're not going to tell you the complete truth. They're going to twist it and turn it to their benefit. And I hope you'll keep that in mind. And I want you to listen carefully to the presentation I have, a couple slides that I'm going to include here later. And then also cue that into the meeting. Listen to the meeting again, and I think you'll have a different view of what they're saying. It's kind of funny when you listen to them at the initial meeting. You tend to believe all the stuff they're saying, but when you have a little background like I'm giving you, and you listen to it, you can see where the lies are coming out. So I think 2020 will be very bad, the final numbers that come out in the next audit. And I don't think 2021 is going to be any better. I think we're also going to have deficits there. So I'd like you to give me some feedback if you could. Tell me if you think I'm doing a good job. Tell me if I'm wasting your time, if I've been helpful. I'd appreciate getting some feedback. Enjoy my slides and the presentations that are going to follow this, and then you can go into the meeting. It's a long meeting, over 3 hours, and I had to watch it 1 hour at a time because it was quite a bit to take. Okay, it wasn't fun watching this. It's very difficult because there's more things going on than actually transacting business for this township. Thank you for listening to my opinion. I wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and be seeing you in January. Thank you.
That's where I kind of am at.
Yeah, just push to the donations still.
Yeah, I think that's a good plan.
Yeah.
We'll agree on that. I mean, Jen, if you'd comment, I mean, you made the comment about the recycling going up. That, I mean, I guess a two-part question there. I mean, you said it before, but you can probably say it again. That's irregardless, what has happened in the recycling industry. That increase does not mean it's because going to weekly or every other week or anything else. No matter having recycling, it's got to change.
True, Dave.
So now, look at this. David Speece and Jennifer Savage are presenting you with a completely false narrative. In other words, they're directly lying to the public. These fees are related to picking up the recycling material. This is done by Blazinski, as you can see here on these two cutouts of I'm presenting to you. This has nothing to do with what happens with the material once it reaches the recycling plant. This is strictly picking it up and transporting it to the recycling facility. So what Mr. Speece and Mrs. Savage are trying to tell us is that the transportation costs incurred by Blazinski are not related to the frequency of pickup. This is a lie. This is a bold-faced lie, and I want you to listen to this stuff carefully when I'm going to explain to you, because this is something that David Speece and Jennifer Savage continue to do time after time. They're lying to the public, trying to create their own narrative. And this is just one of the things that they've been cleaning up at the end of the year in this last meeting for 2020. They want to present this and make you think that there's nothing unusual about this. But you can see I have here 12/9/2019, the last fee we paid monthly in 2019. And the annual recycling fees at that time were $221,000, $18,450 a month. And I also present you with the first payment in January 2020. They went up significantly. The new recycling fee for the year more than doubled, $544,000 a year, $45,000, $346 a month, okay? This is a whopping increase year over year of $322,752. Now, what David Speece and Jennifer Savage would have you believe is that all that increase is due to transportation costs by Blazinski. And I think if we examine their contract and they have to tell us what their cost is, I think we'll find out this is a blatant lie. they are violating the public trust by presenting this information. And you can see what I'm saying. These cost increases, they're trying to make us think it's due to the industry, the recycling industry. But it's directly related to Blazinski. The difference was in 2019, we had them pick up every 2 weeks. In 2020, they're doing it weekly. And I've spoken about this situation many times before. This was to help the recycling industry that basically Mascaro built his recycling plant. He wanted to flatten out, instead of getting every 2 weeks, he wanted to flatten it out so he'd get it every week. And we're paying to subsidize his business. And we really don't have to do this. It's not prudent. It's not efficient for us. It's really a lie what they're telling us. So we went from 2 times a month to 4 times a month. And I don't know if you're willing to pay that. In fact, they're not even including it in our taxes properly yet. This is something that we're subsidizing with our reserve fund. So don't buy the lies. I'm going to continue showing you every chance I get where they've lied to us time after time, and this is very obvious. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of common sense to understand what's happened here. But you will hear David Speece tell us it has nothing to do with the frequency of picking up the recycling. But it certainly does, because that's where the money is going, to the person who's picking up the recycling material. This isn't related to what Mascaro's recycling facility does. It's just simply transportation costs to his facility. And it's more efficient for us to do this every 2 weeks. If you need additional containers, it's a lot cheaper for the township to provide those containers than to have this thing picked up every week. So I hope you'll have some questions. I hope that you will contact our township and ask David Speece to explain himself, because I think it's pretty clear. Either they're just lying to us, or Mr. Speece and our finance director has no idea of what these costs represent. I think, in my opinion, as all these things are my opinion, that they both know what they're doing. They're lying to the public. They're making up excuses. And why would they do that? Why would they spend our money like this when it's not necessary? Well, it's obvious, I think. I don't have to explain it to you. But these are the facts, and they're irrefutable. And we have David Speece and Jennifer Savage misleading the public once again. Thank you, and continue on to watching. This will be attached to the December 14th final meeting of the Board of Supervisors for 2020. This slide is taken from the December 14th Treasury Report. And what I want to show you here, it's as of 11:30, and it's still have about 1 month's worth of expenses remaining, and they average over $1 million a month. And you can see that in the small clip that I have down there where it says expenses, total expenditures. So they're spending $11.5 million in 10 months. I'm sorry, in 11 months. So they're spending $1.15 million a month. The larger clip shows all the revenue near the bottom of the line. Not all the revenue items, but you can see the total. They budgeted $12.6 million to year to date 11/30. They have almost $11 million. The smaller clip, white section there with total expenditures, they budgeted $12.6 million in expenditures for the budget. And they're saying for the budget they intend to be $28,000 in excess revenues over expenditures. That never happens. And also the actuals, you can see that we're actually running a deficit of $573,000. Now, a couple things I want to point out to you in this slide is that you can see under that oval circle there, or the arrow, that they're using $1.2 million of reserve funds to balance the budget. So they're chipping away at our reserves, using them to subsidize your taxes. So yes, they are trying to claim that they're not raising taxes again and they're doing a great job. But really what they're doing is they're trying to avoid scrutiny from the taxpayers. I guess you'll be okay with the fact that they're using reserve funds to subsidize taxes. But in the long run, that's going to really come back and bite you really bad. You can imagine. You can only borrow for so long. And when those reserve funds are gone, as they will be within less than 5 years, you can expect enormous tax increases. You can also see the oval circle with the arrow there, what the year-to-date actual use was. They actually exceeded their budget of transferred funds. So they just spend, as we know they have been doing that, and I've been criticizing them all year. But they spent actually $1,287,000 year to date. And who knows how that's eventually going to end up by the end of December. But we, according to Mrs. Savage, answering Joe Staub's question about what does it look like for 2020, she says, we expect $12 million in revenues, so they still have to collect less than 1.1 million in revenue according to the year-to-date number, and they expect 12.6 million in expenditures. So they still have to spend. They still expect 1.1 million in spending. So that pretty much tracks with the 1 million a month that I mentioned at the beginning of this slide. So we continue to deficit spend. And I have some problems with that. There's some state statutes that require that a certain process is followed when you're going to do this. And I'm looking into that now. But what are we going to do after we spend the 35 million to build the promenade? And trust me, Joe Staub is going to push for the swimming pool. He's going to push, I think these guys haven't talked about it yet, but I think they're going to really push for the crosstown connector, and that's going to be many millions of dollars. Nothing's going to be left in our reserves, and we could have subsidized just off the interest that we would have earned from all this money for many, many years, and then have the reserves available when we had serious issues. But that's not going to happen. These guys are going to spend the money, and then they're going to flee the township. Speece has homes in other places further south of here. Staub has a place in Virginia that he'll go to. Same thing with Gaultier in Carolinas, and Cusatus, who knows where he's going to fly to. He's unpredictable and dangerous. But they're spending our money at an enormous clip, and they're not using good money management, and they're not using smart, intelligent spending here. So this is our budget for 2020, and I don't expect 2021 to be any better. Thank you for listening to this slide. Hope you enjoyed it. Here it is. This is a picture of West 47th Street. As you come up Gibraltar Road and go over the hill, it turns into West 47th Street. This is the snowstorm on December 16th. You can see cars are stuck. People are trying to shovel out. This is designated as an emergency route, and the Exeter Township Highway has not plowed this yet, nor have they put down, cinders or the chemicals that will, make it easier to traverse this road. It's snowing heavily, and here we are stuck on a emergency route. It looks like our township highway services have degraded to such an extent that they're unable to keep the emergency routes open. So if you have a four-wheel drive, you probably can make it up this hill. But if you're not four-wheel drive, this is what happens to you. And it's about 10 after 6. Still no help from the township. This is how things are in Exeter Township today. This slide is a copy of the page 10 of the 2019 audit. This particular slide is prepared by management. It's on page 10 of their management discussion and analysis. Their analysis runs from page 6 to page 17. We're looking at this particular document. I've had to slice it up to fit in this slide, but it basically is showing us the governmental activities for 2018 compared to the most recent audited period of 2019. You will see that we have a $2 million increase in revenue from 2018 to 2019. Primarily, this increase is due to charges for services. These services are permits, fees that have been increased over the year. In addition, some of this is probably also increased activity, but this changes from year to year, and we are limited to how much we can increase the fees that we charge. But $527,000 of the $2 million increase is related to these service charges. And then we have operating grants, $435,000, and the increase came from operating grants and contributions. The contributions were minimal. The grants are the big thing. And the problem with that is they're intermittent. We may not, with COVID-19, obtain the same level of grants. Contributions are almost non-existent. So how this can continue, it's a very variable revenue item. The next item, number 3, is interest income. This increased $454,000 due primarily to the sale of the proceeds of the sewer plant. It went from $191,000 to $646,000. Significant increase considering that was only about the fourth quarter that we earned this interest on the proceeds. Then we also had an increase of $542,000 for the proceeds from the sale of assets. I'm not aware of any large assets that we sold other than a sewer plant. And I believe that this is simply a transfer from sewer plant proceeds into these governmental activity funds, the general fund, significantly to balance the budget. So that's where that came from. And so our revenue increased $2 million. But now let's look at the expenditure side. You can see that expenditures increased by $4.2 million. So in 2019, we had $15.9 million in revenue, which included from sources that are variable. but we spent $20 million. So we had expenditures that exceeded revenues by $4.1 million. We can see this situation also occurred in 2018, where we had $13.7 million in revenue, but we spent $15.8 million, which resulted in a $2 million deficit of spending over revenue. The areas that increased in expenses are number 5, general government. That increased $1.7 million from $2.2 million to almost $4 million. This represents government growth, hiring more people, paying them more money. It just doesn't stop. It gets higher and higher and higher governmental costs. So we're going to have to find a way to cut these expenses. And item number 6, our public safety, that's increased $2 million from $8.5 million to $10.5 million. This is related to police and fire departments. I don't know the details on this, but we'll have to look deeper into it, but it's a significant increase. So between those two increases in spending, those were the significant ones, and that caused the overspending by almost $4.2 million. But it's worse than that. If you combine the last 2 years, spending over revenue, we spent $6.2 million more than the amount of revenue that we brought into through the township through taxes and fees, and also clearly contributions from the sewer plant. So $6.2 million negative. We can't continue spending money like this. And you'll see that in number 7. And in number 8, what I want to show you is item A, B, and C. And first of all, item A, you can see that we transferred in over $79 million. This is the money that saved us by selling the sewer plant. Otherwise, we would have huge deficits. And you can see that in item B, where the net position at the beginning of the year was almost $12 million. But thank you, item C, because of the transfer, the sale of the sewer plant, we were able to have a net positive position of almost $64 million. But the thing that we have to be concerned about, if you look at 2018, they exceeded revenue by $2 million. They transferred in $7.3 million. This money came from the sewer fund. It was a CD that was on deposit. It was supposed to be used to pay off either the debt or improvements in the sewer plant. They raided this money, misappropriated it, because they needed to cover this deficit, and they also needed the $2 million plus to buy the promenade, and they didn't have the money, so they had to take this money. But you can also see, looking at line B for 2018, we were at the beginning of the year, 2018, we had a deficit of almost $26 million. And at the end of the year, we had almost $21 million deficit. This is beyond financial mismanagement by the supervisors. And it's a number of problems. They love to spend. They do not know how to control spending. They do not know how to stay within the budgets that they created. And we have a workforce in administration that is way overpaid, completely overpaid. And that's where you can see the general government increases of 1.7 million year over year. We've hired more people. We pay them salaries that are equivalent of public corporations for profit. This is unheard of in government at this level. But we have many people earning close to $100,000 a year, And the problem is that they are severely underqualified. So we take a hit in both areas. The supervisors like to spend. They prevent myself and other people who are concerned about this from stating their concerns, and they treat us like we really don't know what we're talking about. But I've been involved in over 250 audits, and I could tell you that this report card is an F minus, and it actually is gross negligence on a part of our supervisors, and I think it goes beyond malfeasance on their part. So we need to let them know that we're unhappy, we're extremely unhappy about this, and they should actually resign. We can't continue operating this way. And because they sold the sewer sale, which fixed the overspending and allows them to implement the master plan that they've developed, they're going to keep spending. They're going to spend until all of our money is gone. And you can see from the numbers here on A, B, and C that they had to sell the sewer plant to cover up the mismanaged finances, and also to try to carry out this insane master plans that they've developed along with Simone Collins, while Mr. Granger and Lisa Vanderlane was in charge of the township. So they'll be gone, and we'll be holding an empty bucket, and you can expect taxes to rise significantly in the future, because we can only raise service charges so much. When we get grants, those have to be spent specifically for something, and we have to match part of those grants. Interest income will drop because we're not going to have any money in the bank, and proceeds from the sale of assets, well, the only thing we have left is the Running Country Club, and we can end up selling that at a significant loss. So the takeaway on this should be that the township supervisors are severely mismanaging our finances. And if you don't stand up and voice your concerns about this, it's going to get worse. And if you want to stay in Exeter Township, you're going to pay dearly for that privilege. Hope you enjoyed my presentation. I'm going to follow this up with hopefully a brief slide on our overfunded pension plans. This next slide, we're going to talk about the pension funds that the township has been funding for quite a while. This first one is the Exeter Township Pension Plan. And as you can see, there are $22,212,000 required to have in this pension fund. And what the audit tells us is that we funded our liabilities. We have $31,158,000 in that fund. So essentially, what we've done is we've overfunded this pension plan by $8,946,000. So we've put in this pension 40% more than what was required. Now, the only reason you would do that is because you're not thinking too smartly about this, you're not managing it properly, or you have some corrupt ideas. Now, pension funds do get overfunded, but it's typically because they outperform the expected earnings. Well, and here's the other pension fund we have. This is for employees. And you'll see here that the liability in this one is just under $2 million, $1,871,000. But look at that. We have $2,610,000 in that pension fund. So it also is overfunded by $738,000. This is another 39% overfunded. We're really using the township's money inefficiently and essentially taking it out of our pocket and putting it into the pockets of someone else. And you'll hear people like Dave Speece claim that that's because we put it in there because they can get a better return than we can. And if they're successful, yes, that's true. If they invest badly, they can lose a lot more money. But what he contends is that if we keep it in our bank accounts, we're limited to earning maybe 2-3% at the most. But that's because we keep it protected, but it's our money. So we overfunded these two pension plans by $9,685,315. Why would we purposely overfund these? Again, I can only think of one thing, and it's only bad: corruption. Remember John Granger, when he came here, he redid everything with the pension funds and with Divot, which is an insurance company that he's been involved in, and he's been on the boards of some of these organizations that are managing our money. It's a lot of money if you look at it. We've got over $33 million in these two pension funds. And I could tell you that if we kept the money, just waited until we had to really put it into pension fund, in 1 year interest alone, we would earn at 2% $194,000. That could be used for things here in the township. This isn't just a mistake on their part or something that is due to their inexperience. This is gross negligence. This is malfeasance. This is the misuse of our township's resources. And it's a violation of the public trust. And I just wanted all of you to see this and think about what's going on. This was a plan that was devised by John Casadis. He said in an earlier meeting this year that he wanted to expend as many of the funds from the sewer plant as he could so that he could prevent the current or future Board of Supervisors from what he called misusing it. Well, here is a blatant misuse of the township's funds. These are in another party, third-party hands that we have no control over it, or very little control over it. And it's way overfunded, almost $10 million, and that's outrageous. It's truly outrageous. And anyone who understands managing money understands how bad this is. And you don't do this by mistake. It's a conscious effort to do this. Because what's not in these numbers is that in 2020, this year, they've already put in over $300,000 more into the Exeter Township Police Pension Fund, where it wasn't necessary. So what do you think they're doing? Well, at this rate, they're just going to get rid of all of our money, and we're going to see very large tax increases. Thank you.